Aha. Hi, Tim.
Hello.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the computer. I tried getting you on the link with the computer from Jennifer. That did not work.
Oh my gosh.
So now I'll go back to the computer and put it in there. Let me get that in there. What it says is the host has another meeting in progress. And obviously you don't. So let me go back to see if I can get in on Zoom here. Okay, Zoom, sign in, join meeting. Okay, I guess we have a different number. Must have been an update on numbers. I had the old 847 here from Jennifer, but it said January 15th, which is today.
I'm gonna have to sit down with her and we got to straighten this out because, you know, this is the same number I've had and
4744 1086 1086. Okay, join. Okay, 18161181619. Okay. Oh God, what happened there? 1816119. 181619. Join. There we go.
Okay.
Okay. I'm there now. Let me get rid of this other one. See if I can leave here.
Leave me. Okay. Now I'm back with you on the computer.
so if people are signing in from what she sent, they're not getting here.
Well, it'll say host has another meeting in place. Now, Floss, where did you get this latest ID meeting number from Tim? Did it arrive today?
I didn't write anything down.
Right here, dear.
Maybe that
This is your handwriting right here.
Maybe that is for Tuesday night.
No, it isn't. I'm talking with Tim right now, and it's not Tuesday night. So
I think she's got the wrong number she sent out.
So it was a link, and
Right.
I put it into the link there, and I had that happen once before. I couldn't get in. It said you were at another meeting, and you would sign in shortly, but you never did. I gave up about 20 minutes later.
I think she's got the wrong link.
Yeah, well, for today, I think so. My wife has the correct one in a notebook, but she doesn't even remember putting it down.
That must be the one that I sent to you or texted you last week.
Right. But I was using Jennifer's up-to-date one today.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to call her after this and just say, we got to figure this out because I think she's putting the wrong link out. Because clearly here I am, and this is the link that I had last week.
Right.
This is basically the same link I've been using for months now.
Right, and that's good. I'm gonna go back to the all boxes.
Yeah, doesn't she like you?
What?
Doesn't she like you?
Does she like me?
That's Flossie in the background. I don't.
We get along just fine. I just think somehow she's getting, I don't know whether she's looking at the wrong meeting or the wrong, I don't know what she's looking at, but clearly it's not. Because I go directly to the Zoom on Mikveh Israel and click to start my meeting right through Mikveh Israel's Zoom. So, and that's how I got here. So that's the meeting setup that's in our Zoom catalog or our Zoom calendar.
Yeah,
So somehow she's copied something in there that's not right from a different meeting perhaps or something. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Drive-in Shabbat canceled Friday and Saturday.
Right.
That notification there. And then at the bottom of the thing is a list with your join us online Judaic courses, Tuesday, Judaism. Okay, that I know about. Okay.
Tim, can I give you a compliment?
Yes.
All right, Erev Shabbat, you're getting a nice compliment here. We so enjoyed your class on Tuesday, and we're taking it, and we know a lot what you're saying, but how you're presenting it is very novel, very interesting, and we thank you for it.
Well, thank you. It'll be interesting too, because like I said, there's about 11 people in the class who are going through conversion.
Wow.
They are going through.
Wow.
Yes, they're planning to convert. I mean, until they do, they do. But their goal, that's what they're in the class for, is to convert. And, some of what, comes up is different, especially, you come from a Christian background, and, Jewish theology and philosophy is different than Christian theology and philosophy. So, it may cause them, sometimes they have difficulty with certain of the concepts, and that's okay. That's what the class is for. So it'll be interesting. This first one, not so much, but like the one coming up Tuesday, we're going to talk about a little more theological concepts of God, how Reformed Jews look at God, how Reformed Jews look at sin. And if you have a Christian background, it's a very different way of looking at it.
But
We're
you're
not burdened,
liberated.
right?
You're liberated. It's not like they're starting with Judaism and then going to Catholicism, which is
Right.
not as open and liberal. So,
Right.
Yeah,
thing.
Tim, I just went back in to that latest email, January 15th. I pressed it again, and the host has another meeting in progress.
All right, well, let's
Okay,
talk.
so
All right,
I just wanted to double check
I'm
it.
going to call, as soon as this is over, I'm going to call her and get this straightened out, because I'm assuming she's at the office right now.
Okay,
All
and
right.
it has a different meeting number ID. And
Right,
by
so
the way,
I think she copied something incorrectly from a different.
your meeting the other day, one of the statistics you had there that really surprised me, I hadn't realized that there were so many Jews by choice out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, wow,
Well, there have been some Reform rabbis who have written articles about the fact that people choosing Judaism is part of what is saving Judaism. Is people making the choice to convert is part of what is keeping Judaism alive. So
That's very interesting.
of course, our Orthodox brethren say, be fruitful and multiply. So,
well, yes, and when you see the families of those who are Orthodox, Hasidim, whatever, they generally are trailing a number of children behind them.
and God bless them, more power to them. But
Exactly. All right, I guess we'll get started here, and probably no one else, because they got the wrong information if they looked at the email. So, like I said,
I'll get Larry.
oh yeah, give Larry a call in
Give
case
me
he
the
wants
number.
of Larry.
Not of Larry. Of how he gets on of Larry.
Yeah. I have the number right
Okay.
here. You have the number. You wrote it down.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Tim, he's telling me I did something right. Or
there you go. There you go. All right, so we are in the second Torah portion in Exodus. We started Exodus last week. This is our second Torah portion in Exodus. And now the story that we know really, really well from Passover, from the Haggadah, really gets moving along as we move into the second Torah portion. Moses and Aaron are getting set to go and confront the Pharaoh, the mission that they have in front of them. But before they go and present their case to the Pharaoh, God gives them one more revelation. And it is here that we get this unpronounceable name of God, where God reveals himself. This is the Yud-He, the Vav-He. And it's supposed to be, according to what rabbinical scholars on the Torah tell us, that this is where Moses really connects in his own way to the essence of all that God truly embodies. When he is presented with this Yod-He, Vav-He, it's unpronounceable because it's so big, it's so magnificent. We know that at the time, at biblical times, on the times of the Torah, there were other gods out there that were being worshipped by other tribes. I mean, we had our one God, but we knew that other peoples were worshiping other gods. And the early Israelites knew this. They knew of the existence of these other gods. They understood, the Israelites understood that their God was the one true God. But he existed among
Tim,
all these gods.
Tim,
Yes.
excuse me. I just called Jane and her first thing is, help, we can't get on with Tim. Can you? I said, take it easy. I have the number. So they're joining here.
Okay.
Your loyal followers are.
I don't know if you have to let him in or not. I don't think so, but.
No, he should be able to just click in. I don't have it where I have to like admit people because that's
Very good.
Okay. I didn't hear what you said because I went in the other room.
Well, as I said, this is where we get the Yod Hey Vav Hey. Comes in at the beginning of this Torah portion, and it's in this. Here we go.
Here they go. They must have a bad hair day. You're not seeing their picture.
I need a haircut. I don't know.
Hello, Jane. Hi there.
Hello.
Hello, Tim.
Thank you.
Tim,
One day we'll figure this whole Zoom thing out, really.
This is always an adventure, isn't it?
Yes,
Well,
I don't know.
I think what happened is she copied the link for a different meeting.
yeah.
Clearly not this one. So I'm going to call her after this is over, and we're going to straighten it out so that this will not happen. Because
We love seeing you guys.
Right.
So that way you're here.
But this will be the link that you'll use from now on, or for
this
all.
is the link that I have set up for the next 2 months. The one that you're on right now is I have set this up through the end of February.
All right, I don't pay attention to that. You know, I saved it, but I didn't look for it. No problem. I got it now. Okay.
I just think she copied, she looked, and there's so many meetings on the Zoom calendar. I guess it would be easy to think you copied the right one, and maybe you didn't, because the rabbi's got his classes, then the rabbi's got other things where he's meeting with people on Zoom. And I mean, so I understand it could be a mistake, but I want to make sure that she has the right one. I will give it to her directly and say, this is what it is to the end of February. And hopefully we're just going to keep the same one going for the next several months. So that's my plan.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're talking about Yud Hey Vav Hey because it's at the beginning of this Torah portion where that revelation is made to Moses. And it's really here where the essence of God sort of becomes really understood by Moses, where God is sort of separate from the rest of the gods. We know there were other gods out there. The God of the Israelites, the Hebrews, whatever you want to call them, was their God, their one God, but they knew there were other gods. And with this revelation of Yud Hey Vav Hey, this is where the God of the Hebrews or the God of the Israelites really transcends the other gods out there. Sort of is the God that will be the God of our people, the God of our patriarchs, our matriarchs, and comes forth in being fully realized as the one God, greater, more powerful than all the others. Any recognition of other gods in any way being equal to our God at this point will now be considered idolatry. So now this is kind of where we get this idea. If you're worshiping any other God out there than our one true God, the Yod Hey, the Vav Hey, then you are moving into idolatry. We actually kind of intone this idea every single time we go to Shabbat services or every time we go to a service and we pray the Aleinu. Because it is in the prayer of the Aleinu where we mention again that this is the one God, and we pray for the day when all people will understand that this is the one God. And if you'll remember from Judaism 201, when we talk about some of the prayers, that's the prayer that's gotten Jews in trouble at times because they're saying, well, who are you people to think you've got the corner on the market of God? But, that's a whole different subject that we could talk about later. Anyway, so Moses now has a deeper understanding of the power, the awesomeness, the magnificence of God. And this is something that's going to grow in Moses up until the point of death. I mean, Moses will, throughout his life, have a greater understanding and even understand more as he goes through life of how powerful God is. But in spite of this, interestingly enough, in spite of the fact that Moses now understands the awesome power of God, he does try one last time before he goes and confronts the Pharaoh to see whether God might want to change his mind and pick someone else for this very awesome task in front of him. He says, I just don't know that I can convince the people. I don't know that I'm going to be able to, have them believe me that I'm really representing God, because they think of their Pharaoh as a God. So why are they going to listen to me? But God once again tells Moses, I'm going to be with you. You are going to have Aaron with you. So you're not going to face this all by yourself. And he says, I'm placing you. God says to Moses, I'm placing you for me. You are standing in for me. So you were standing in for God when you stand in front of Moses, because I will be right there with you. So he says, in a sense, it almost comes to a God-to-God confrontation. They think of the Pharaoh as God. You are my representative of God on earth. So it's going to be an equal playing field, is what he tells Moses, basically. But God is very honest with Moses, because he does say, I'm not going to tell you this is going to be easy. He says this because it's not. He warns Moses ahead of time, a bit of foreshadowing that Pharaoh has a very hard heart. It's not going to be easy to soften him up. So don't expect, that this is you're going to walk in, you're going to have a discussion, and all of a sudden he's going to be okay with it. And as we know from the story, that's exactly what happens. A little interesting trivia point here is when Moses is about ready to go in and confront Pharaoh, he's already 80 years old. So he's not doing this as a young man. We have to think of like young strapping Moses going in and, confronting Pharaoh. But actually, according to the Torah, Moses is 80 when he is going to confront the Pharaoh, and Aaron is 83. So you've got these two guys who are going to come in and confront Pharaoh, and they're, how we catalog time in the Torah is always up for discussion, but they are already, wise in their years, I guess we could say.
Tim?
Yes.
Tim, is it the Pharaoh that Moses knew when he was growing up, or is it a new Pharaoh?
This is a new guy. And we don't know they call him the Pharaoh, but we don't know any more than that. I mean, the one thing the Torah does not reveal to us is his name. Whether this was, there were many Pharaohs, Ramses, and all these people.
So
The Torah does not name this Pharaoh.
But he wouldn't know that Moses is beginning
Right.
his palace.
Right.
So it's
Yeah,
new.
because Moses does have a history there, of course.
Okay.
Which is one of the reasons why Moses, in a sense, is one of the reasons why Moses is allowed into the court to even speak to the Pharaoh, because he does have a history there. So he's not just some unknown person sort of walking in. The people are aware of him.
Why does God send Aaron with him?
I'm sorry, what is it? I missed the first part.
Why does God send Aaron with Moses?
Because he needs that partly because he needs emotional support, and because he needs someone to sort of prop him up. When Moses first says, I don't want to do this, I'm not capable, I'm not a good speaker, I stutter, etc. It's God who says, but I'm going to send your brother with you because he can be there. He can be your support system. So, it's always good when you're going to confront an enemy to have a support system.
But God never wanted just to send Aaron in lieu of Moses.
Oh, no. Moses was choice number one. Moses is number one. But when Moses sort of, backs off, and then God says, well, you know what? I'll send Aaron with you, and then I'll be with you. I'm going to be there too. You won't see me, but I'm there with you. So, he wants to reassure Moses that you're not facing this challenge all by yourself. You're not just going to stand.
I think Jane had a question.
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
does Moses have a family, like a wife and children?
We know that
we hear about them.
We don't really. He does have a wife. She is mentioned once, maybe more than once, but at this point, I believe there was one mention of her having a wife, and I believe there are children. But again, then that sort of thing just sort of drops away, which is typical in the Torah. We'll have this mention of people, and we get their name once, and then they just sort of disappear.
No, because Aaron, of course, had his sons, and they were priests.
Right.
Yeah, but
It's
Moses'
really interesting.
wife-
You would think that, maybe you could send, if Moses is 80, then we would think that his, children are of an age that they could go in and be a support system. But again, we don't really know what becomes of them. So.
Yeah, but Moses' wife wasn't, after Moses kills the Egyptian, the overseer, Then
Yes.
he goes to the Midian, and that's where he marries the
He
woman,
marries the Midianite woman.
the
Yes.
Midianite woman.
Yeah.
And, so but we don't know if he has a wife in Egypt.
Well, or whether she's with him when he comes back. We don't know. We don't know. Sephora. Her name is Sephora.
Right.
That's my Hebrew name, by the way.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
I was with him. He didn't have to work.
Well, see, you needed to be there and help him out a little bit, poor guy.
Who just call you Birdie?
Yeah, Bird, I'm Big Bird.
Right, it's a Torah.
I have the newspaper from that incident, actually, which is the 26th of Kislev at 1270 BCE. And the announcement in the newspaper that Moses
Is a Hebrew.
is a Hebrew, and that
Uh-oh.
Pharaoh's daughter is standing by her son.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
additionally, that Moses' sister is under arrest at that time.
Oh, no.
And that stopped the press. It says, early this morning, the fugitive Moses crossed the Egyptian border and headed for the wilderness. This was reported by a special courier who arrived at Ramses an hour before daybreak. It is believed here in Goshen that Moses will seek a haven in Midian as a political refugee. The Midianites are actually related to the Abraham class. So there you have it in print from
There you go. And see,
from the Chronicles of the past.
they had their scandals back then, just like we have our scandals today.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful because here we have Hebrew leader condemns murder of overseer.
Sweet.
So you can make up all kinds of stories that accompany this.
Well, that used to be an interesting assignment that I would use with kids, when I was teaching English, is to write up something from whatever we were reading as if it were going to be a news story with a headline and how it would be reported. And then I would have them write it from a sensationalistic point of view, or write it from a just merely factual point of view, so it was a good thing in getting the kids to understand different points of view for the same incident.
And here's the next edition that came out.
We quit
Hebrew. We quit Egypt today.
We're out of here.
And here are instructions for leaving. Here's the Exodus instructions on how to leave, where to assemble, where to meet. It's almost like assembling the group to get out of Egypt.
I was going to say, did they have to go through TSA to get out?
It says you use a Twitter account, I think.
Okay, there you go.
Twitter.
Tim, Larry has been holding these all year to show you.
Yeah, this was the book.
That's very clever. Yeah.
This was given to all of the bar mitzvah children, I believe, or Hebrew school children. I forget who it was at the time in Lake Hiawatha, Jerusalem.
Well, it's a great way to present the information. I mean, why not?
It's a great way to show that there are many unknowns.
Yes, there certainly are. As I've said before, there's more unknowns probably than there are knowns. As I said, people show up and then we never hear about them again, or we don't always know the backstory to everything. All right, so where are we here? Oh, we're about to get into the plagues because Moses is going to confront Pharaoh with a number of plagues. And as we know from Passover, the plague will befall Egypt, and then Pharaoh will say, okay, I'll let you go. And then when Moses rescinds the plague, then Pharaoh continues to change his mind over and over again. Now, historians and Torah scholars alike have tried to see in their studies whether these plagues have any relationship to climatological incidences in Egypt so that they could sort of be rationally explained. And from what I could tell in my reading was, for the most part, probably not. The Nile does turn red at times from mineral deposits from its source up in the mountains. So where, we have the plague where the Nile turns blood red. I mean, that could explain that. We know that at times, there can be infestations in farmlands of locusts and things of that sort. So, there is some logical explanation for that. The other thing that people often wonder was, were the plagues like one right after the other? When Moses would rescind one plague and then Pharaoh would change his mind, did it immediately follow with the next one? Most Torah scholars and historians think that there was a year between one plague and the next one. So they were not just like right in a row, which I thought was interesting. I had never read that before, but in one of the sources I was looking at, it was saying that they think that there could have been a year's lapse of time from one plague to the next. So that means this was going on for quite some time.
So
Yeah.
Moses was aging as this is happening. He
Of
had
course,
to come
yes.
back.
Yes.
Tim, the other explanation that I've seen, partial explanation, was there was a volcanic eruption in Santorini in Greece. And apparently they have found particles from that eruption in the soil samples in and around Israel. And it traveled quite far. Now, an interesting thing is that after several volcanic explosions, they have found a tremendous increase in the number of frogs and the number of frogs that come. And also the other thing is the darkening, you know, where you blot out the sun because of the dust and the vapor from the volcanic. So, I mean, there were a couple of things that they tried. The one that is most difficult is the death of the firstborn.
Well,
how did that occur? And even that they've tried to explain by the position of the firstborn in the rooms in the house, where he may have been situated in a different room at a higher place where the vapors might not have gotten to him, these different vapors or stuff. But there have been a couple of explanations, and apparently the Santorini one has some merit as far as, you know, some of the plagues that could have occurred.
Well, when you think about how far that goes, because look at how we get Sahara dust here in Savannah, coming all the way across the ocean from Africa. So we know those things, you know, particulates can travel a long, long way in the air. We know that because we experience it even now.
Especially when you go back and you think that it did not occur, you know, one after the other or one period.
Right.
It's almost like, and I read Mary Zamor, who we knew from Temple B'nai Or in Morristown. She did the Devar Torah that you had sent us today. And she said that, yeah, she was thinking more like climate change now with some of the plagues in her Devar Torah that you had sent out there.
Now, if we talk about the you know, the plague of the killing of the firstborn and whatever, if we're talking about the firstborn, was it just firstborn male, or was it firstborn no matter who the firstborn was? Was it, if the firstborn was a daughter, was the daughter killed? Or was it just the male children? Because there are rabbis out there who say it didn't matter, that it didn't matter. The firstborn child, regardless of whether it was a male child or a female child, was the one that suffered. Also, they also killed the firstborn cattle.
Oh.
Yes, because the cattle were revered in ancient Egypt. And so this was considered to be a real blow to their belief system to also kill the firstborn of the cattle. So,
was there a specific order in which they did the plagues? Is there a rhyme or reason?
Sephardi.
yeah. I mean,
Passover.
we recite them when we do the Passover.
I didn't mean that, but why they chose the order they did.
Well, they're supposed to be getting increasingly horrific, you know? I mean, because when you get to the end, obviously, the idea of killing children is about as horrific as you can get when you think about it. You know, you've got bugs, you've got things of that sort, which is nasty. But and when they describe the darkness, the plague of the darkness, it's supposed to be a darkness that is so unbelievably dark, where you can't, I mean, the idea you can't see your hand in front of your face. But then the question comes up, and I read commentaries on this as well, is, okay, so they're enveloped in this horrific darkness. Was one of the plagues, were they allowed to light candles during the darkness? And if they were, then was the darkness really as bad as I mean, I'm just throwing questions out there because I wasn't there. I don't know either. Or was it so dark they couldn't find their candles, or they couldn't find their torches, or whatever? I don't know. I mean, it's stuff that we can think about, you know, logically today. You know, it's hard for us to fathom. I mean, we've all been in dark places. When I first started, this is a crazy story, but when I first started working at the synagogue, and I don't know if you remember that upstairs, you know, by the library on the second floor where we would have Torah study around the table, and then across from there are the restrooms. And if you've gone in those restrooms, there's like a little room first with a door, and then a second room which actually opens into the restroom. I got into the restroom and and the light wasn't on, and the door closed behind me, and I could, for a moment, it was so dark, I couldn't find where I needed to go to find the next door, and I feeling around on the wall for the light switch, and I couldn't find it. Maybe that's what it was like in that darkness, because for about 20 seconds, I was in a bit of a panic mode. Which is stupid.
Came out, Tim.
Well, it was, and then later I'm thinking, this is so ridiculous. The door was right behind me. I just walked in it. Logic would be, pull the door back open. But when you're panicking for a moment, I guess logic sort of defies you. So, but anyway, I mean, when we think about these plagues, we think about the whole business. I mean, the idea of being overrun by frogs isn't pleasant. I mean, think about everywhere you walk, you're squishing frogs. Not so great. And the lice and whatever. A lot of what Torah scholars say is that over the years, as the story, and did you know that the Haggadah is the most printed book in Jewish literature?
Wow.
There are so many variations and versions of Haggadot out there that it is the most printed of any book in all of Jewish literature, more than the Tanakh, more than like our Torah commentaries. But if you've ever gone into like a pretty large Jewish bookstore, like in New York or something, if any of them still exist, they haven't all gone online, and you would go to a section and you would look at the Haggadot that are on the walls, there's just shelf after shelf after shelf after shelf, thin ones, fat ones, illustrated ones. We own about 10 different ones, and that's small compared to some people. Of course, you have your traditional, was it Maxwell House one that they used?
Yeah.
Do they still give that out at the grocery
Manischewitz.
store? Or the Manischewitz? I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many out there. So this story, as it's been told and told and told, a lot of Torah scholars and a lot of historians say it's sort of been embellished and it can't completely be explained away by natural occurrences or science. Some of it, yes. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter, because it's meant to illustrate to us the awesome power of God. It's meant to illustrate for us, ultimately, this is really where we formulate as a people during this whole story of what we know as the Haggadah, the Passover, and all of that. And it's in this part of the Torah that we're reading right now where God commands us to remember this event, where we really have the rubric for a Passover celebration is set down for us right here in the Torah, where we are reading right now. So, we're going back and this story goes, how stories get told and retold and things change throughout the years. So, what's here in the Torah, and then people have embellished upon that, with illustrations and things. I mean, who knows? Who knows? So,
Embellish
yeah.
a little further.
Yes.
I was thinking that if in fact they think it's a year, if it's a year like we have, 365 or whatever days, 64 and a quarter days, then it would have to be a progression, because otherwise, why would Pharaoh ever change his mind? If it's darkness, it had to go from light to dark to dark to dark to dark to darkest.
Right.
That's the only way in my mind I could even explain somebody changing their mind.
Right. You're right. It has to be something that gets increasingly more nefarious and difficult, as you said, or Pharaoh's never, ever going to have his heart changed to the point of wanting to let the people go, which is why God, I guess, ultimately for the very last plague with the death of the firstborn, you've got to realize I'm going to pull out all the stops now. You can't get much, as I said, much more difficult to deal with than all of the children that are going to be slaughtered. And then we get into this gets into a whole interesting theological discussion as well, which was some of the things I was coming across when I was looking at this portion. How do we feel, or how are we supposed to feel about a God who is willing to slaughter innocent children? There are rabbis who have done great discussions. How are we supposed to look at a God who is taking innocent children, not adults even, innocent children, slaughtering them, the purpose being to let the Hebrews go out of slavery into their own land and get them out from under the enslavement of the Pharaoh? But it still begs the question, And then it says, and are we today, people looking back on this story, are we supposed to have sympathy for these slaughtered children?
Yes.
They were our enemy. They were our enemy, and they were enslaving us. But should we, it's like, then it gets into, so should we have sympathy for soldiers who die on the enemy's side?
What's equally disturbing is that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. So in other words, even if he had a hard heart to start with, and he may have given in after one of the earlier plagues, God said, no, I'm going to go through with it. And each time I gave more and more punishment, and he continued to harden his heart. So, I mean, that to me always puzzled me.
Right.
And
I mean, did it have to get to that level? I mean, you would think that, you know, after one or two, you know, you've got the blood in the Nile, and then you've got, you know, the
God
locusts.
made him defiant in a way. God put the evil thought in him and made him defiant and said, okay, now that you're so defiant, because I made you defiant, I'm going to punish you, and I'm going to continue to punish you, and I'm going to continue. And I mean, eventually, you know, Pharaoh gives in, and then he relents again, you know, when he sends his troops out before
Exactly.
the crossing
Right.
of the Red Sea, or the Sea of Reeds, whatever it's called.
Exactly. When you really think about this whole business of the story of, you know, that is part and parcel to our Passover celebration every year, there's so many different things you can really stop to ponder and think about, you know, as much as, you know, when we know the story, and it's got its beginning, it's got its end, and freedom and all of that. There are a lot of, like, underneath that layers of things that really cause us to stop and think, you know, why did it have to be this bad? And why did it have to go to death of children? And, you know, how are we today supposed to look at the slaughter of children, even though they were on the other side?
Tim,
Yes.
this goes full circle in one way, because that's how the story, you know, kind of starts with Moses. He is one of the victim, well, not, he wasn't a victim, but he was one of the escapees from the Pharaoh's decree about killing all the firstborn males.
Right. Right.
So-
And then you want to get this, you want to move this into another direction, you can get the whole Christological aspect of this in the New Testament, when Jesus was supposed to be slaughtered by the decree of King Herod, and why Mary and Joseph had to flee in order to save his life. You know, because and those children who were slaughtered at that point were, by the Roman Catholic Church, declared saints.
Thanks.
The sainthood of the holy innocents, they're called, because they were innocent children who were massacred, but they were able to get Jesus out before it happened. So, I mean, this idea of murdering of innocent children is something that's happened more than once. And it is disturbing when you think about it. I mean, try to put it in perspective today. Something like this were going on, and we would be absolutely horrified by, you know, something of this nature. And it was horrific. It's the one thing that changes Pharaoh's mind. But as Larry said, then ultimately, even then, he has a change of heart, because as they're about ready to cross the sea, they look behind them and they can see the dust of the chariots coming after them. So even all of that death and all of that slaughter wasn't enough to make Pharaoh completely change his mind to say, okay, go, get out of here. I've had it. I'm done with you. You know, we have suffered enough. So how far, I mean, when you talk about a hard heart, that's a really hard heart. I mean, I'm just, you know, we've got these two leaders. We've got Pharaoh as the leader of the Egyptians, and Moses sort of standing in for God as the leader of the Hebrews, and they just keep butting heads and butting heads and butting heads. Both stubborn, because Moses isn't backing off either, because he's got God on his side, and God says, okay, you got to go in, and this is going to be the next thing we're going to do, and this is going to be the next thing we're going to do. I mean, it's really a story with more layers. I mean, you can take it for the simplistic notion of what it is, but it's got a lot more to it. There's a lot more layers here that you can really talk about, you know, and you can talk about it. I mean, it also calls into question, you know, leadership. You know, what kind of leadership do we want? Do we want a leader like Pharaoh, who's really just so strong and out there? You know, I would guess much more of a dictatorial sort of leader. Or do we want someone, you know, who's got a little bit more willing to see the other side of things and a little bit more lenient? You know, frankly, I wouldn't want Pharaoh in charge of me. I'm just saying that. So where do we go next? I just found some of these little trivial things as I was doing some of the research on this portion. As I said, I started to think about, the massacre of children and what it takes to get somebody to finally change his mind on what he's doing. And it really caused me to stop and think, a little bit more to some of the nuances of what's here, rather than just plague, go, change my mind, plague, go, change my mind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, And
Tim,
yesterday the report came out from the Justice Department. I mean, just to try and throw something up here that, may or may not be relevant, about the fact that the Justice Department, under the Attorney General and under Trump, when they separated the children out, they had no plan for actually watching where these children were going to go, or actually putting them, into safe hands and things of that nature. But their overall objective apparently was to inflict damage on the parents and the immigrants, and was a warning to the future immigrants, that the possible, people that were coming in here, illegal immigrants over the border, that so it's basically, or it's not killing them, but it's basically, almost the same, it's separating an infant, and knowing that the policy here would be to separate the children at a very, very young age.
Well, we're not killing them directly. It's not an outright slaughter. I mean, they may die of, malnourishment and other things like that, but it's using children as pawns, clearly. I mean, we are taking innocent children and using them
that you're putting them through, sure.
Right. So I guess the more history changes, the more it stays the same in some ways, because here again, the parallel is very apt. The idea of, okay, let's use children as sort of innocent pawns here, in our to get whatever we want politically out of this. So, yeah, I mean, we do see it still in its own way happening even now, in our own time. And it's horrifying to see that. I mean, as I said, we weren't killing them, but still the idea of children being separated from their parents, their moms, their dads, and whatever. I mean, and when you saw some of them, it was horrifying. And then there is too often we just don't learn the lessons we're supposed to learn, I guess.
Another one? Tim, when they're teaching the story of Passover now, are the children learning what you just said, that the thought it was a year in between plagues? Because I've never heard it before, and I'm just curious, are they teaching it in the Hebrew schools today?
I doubt it. I don't think so. I don't think that, I mean, that was just something, as I was digging in a little bit, that I happened to find some interesting commentaries that talked about that. I would think that probably is presented much the same way it's always been presented, the story, the plagues. I mean, I always, in my mind, I had this idea, and it just because it made sense to me from the way I heard it, that, you would have a plague, that one would go away, God and Moses would talk, and in a matter of maybe a few days, a week, you're on to plague number 2, and then the same thing happens, and then you're on to plague number 3. The idea of it being stretched over, a year's time from plague 1 to plague 2 to plague 3, etc., never really occurred to me.
Well, even more interesting is some of the archaeological evidence that they found after the Israelites left Egypt and traveled through the land of Canaan and on their way to the Promised Land. You think of that as an instantaneous kind of thing, like it happened in one moment. Pack like it says in here. Here's the meeting station packed. We're going to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to go. Apparently, there are references that they found on different stones in Egypt that show warrants for people that have left Egypt, prisoners and slaves of other, whether they were Jewish or not, that have escaped through different paths. And these were kind of like proclamations, if you see them, and they've been on Steeler, that they found there. And basically, so there were people that were leaving at the time. Now, we had attended a series of lectures from a Rutgers University professor in the Department of Religious Studies, Gary Regensburg, and you could look him up. And he basically showed that the settlements that were made, because the Israelites could not go through the Jordan Valley, because that was basically near the Jordan River, was too close, because that was patrolled, I guess, by one tribe or another, and they couldn't go on the seashore by the Mediterranean, so they had to go through the Middle Land. And they found what they think are Jewish settlements, or pretty sure were Jewish settlements at the time, or remnants of them. And they found them historically aging from different kinds of things that were there, clay pots and bones and of animals and things like that. And they found them over approximately 100 years. So they think the Exodus took place not in one instantaneous swoop where people said, all right, let's go, 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, get in the car and we're going to open the leave. It took place that it wasn't one singular event. So it is very likely that, these plagues would have taken time. Does God give the Pharaoh an opportunity to relent after each plague? I don't remember what the Torah says.
Yes, well, he goes back.
Does he go back after each plague and he says, okay, is that
and
enough
he
now?
asks, and
Yes.
He does ask him.
Yes.
So there is an interval of time,
Yes.
obviously, to let the plague settle in.
But it could be days.
Yeah,
Right.
it never tells us how long. I mean, so, I think a lot of us think that it was a quicker succession of one after the other, but historians and the Torah scholars seem to think it was longer than that. And another interesting point that I read too when I was looking at this was that there are many scholars who think that when the Hebrews left Egypt, they took some Egyptians with them. That lower class Egyptians who were also not treated well by the Pharaoh, who were not of the upper classes, who saw the Hebrew, flight out of Egypt as a way for them to get out as well. So the idea that this was just the Hebrews, there were some other tag-alongs that they believe actually came with the Hebrews and ultimately then converted. I guess it would be like conversion to Judaism as well, because there is talk of the idea that there had to be circumcision and stuff that was going on. So you have these other peoples who felt also put upon or downtrodden by the Egyptians, and they sort of hitched their wagon to the Hebrews when they were leaving, and they went out of Egypt right along with them.
Yeah, there were probably many Israelites that stayed.
And that's another thing, when you have this idea of we're going to leave, we're going to go, and you can bring this up to the Holocaust too. Do you go? Do you stay? Do you go? Do you stay? Everybody has to make a decision. The unknown is out there. We don't know what's going to happen. God says it's going to be good, but you know what? I don't know. I know here it's not good. I know that I'm suffering, but at least I know, I have the known versus the unknown. And a lot of people, they don't like the unknown. It scares them.
Yeah, the other mystifying thing, obviously, is the part with the golden calf, of where did they get the gold to build the golden calf?
Oh, well, that's explained in the Torah.
Is it where?
Yes. In the Torah, there is a point where they go to the Egyptians. The Hebrews actually go to the Egyptians and ask for gold and silver. And the Egyptians willingly give them jewelry and some things to take with them. And the rabbis say that the reason that the Egyptians were willing to do this, were willing to give over some pieces of gold, some things of silver and whatever, is that the Egyptian people, not the Pharaoh necessarily, but the everyday Egyptian people actually had a great deal of admiration for the Hebrews. And so this was their sort of like, we admire your strength and what's going on here. So we're going to give you these things. So they have these things with them when they go, because they got them from the Egyptians. It wasn't that just all of a sudden they had gold. So they did have items of precious metals with them when they were fleeing out of Egypt. So that is actually explained in the Torah.
When we were in Cairo several years, I'm sorry, Flo, what's one other comment? No, when we were in Cairo several years ago, they took us to the synagogue in Cairo, which is basically not used because the number of Jews,
is what, like 5?
The number of Jews in Cairo or Egypt is extremely small, if there are any left. So it's kind of like a monument to somebody. But at one time, I think they had, even prior to the 48 war, the Israeli War for Independence, I think there were 3 million Jews still living in Cairo, in Egypt, up until that time.
Yeah, at one point, Egypt did have a thriving Jewish community.
Yeah, so I mean, they've had a thriving Jewish community from the time of the Exodus all the way through the War for Independence.
Right.
Tim, what is the number or the guesstimate of those Jews that chose not to leave when they left Egypt?
That we
I
don't
know
know. We
when
don't
I
know whether,
was school, I was so surprised you assumed they're all going to leave, but a lot
didn't.
chose not to leave for
right,
the reason you said, not knowing the question mark, what's ahead.
right. So, I mean, we don't know, how many, was it 20? Was it 200? I mean, we don't have an exact figure of how many actually even left either. How many, actually said, okay, we're going, let's go, let's get out of here, let's take our chance. And then those who said, I can't do it, I can't go. I'm too afraid to face what's out there. So, it'd be nice if people were but they needed better census takers back then, and I guess they didn't have them.
Does Larry's newspaper tell us?
I'll
Larry,
check,
does your
I'll check the newspaper and I'll see if they have an estimate of the number that stayed. Yeah.
count, huh?
Yeah, like,
We could publish our own newspaper.
72,412.
We could fill in some of the blanks. I mean,
That's right. We could write our own. We could write our own newspaper. We'll take our own census and we'll just do it ourselves, after the fact. I mean, it's all these little interesting things. Again, when you stop to realize the complexity of all of this, the complexity of taking an entire group of people who have been in a place for a long period of time, yes, enslaved, but rousing them to the point where we're going. Okay, and if you're gonna go, you got to go now. We're not gonna spend any more time thinking about it. We've had our chance. Let's go. Let's get out of here. And then you got to wonder, for those who didn't go, what became of their lives? Were they then treated even, more poorly to pay back for those who did leave? There's so much you could write here. You could write a novel here, a historical novel, and fill in, and maybe somebody has, and I just haven't read it, about all of these, interesting little tidbits.
Well, that's the Anita Demont kind of books, about earlier than that, I think. But, some of those kind of stories that she writes from a women's point of view, or
the Red Tent,
those kind of books. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of room for, somebody to step in, take what we know, and then fill in what we don't know, and you could create quite a story, quite an interesting historical fiction kind of thing out of all of this. Because it certainly lends itself to it.
I forget, there was a book by Doctorow, E.L. Doctorow, and I forget the City of God. I don't know if you ever read that book, City of God. But City of God is also like a very difficult book to read, because the incidents just jump all around. It's almost like reading James Joyce, stream of consciousness kind of thing. Not quite as bad, but in one paragraph, he makes the comment that, why am I writing a book like this? And he says, because I'm trying to follow the same, I'm trying to make a bestseller. And he says, what's the bestseller in the world is the Bible, aside from the Haggadah, let's say now, but let's say it's the Bible. And he says, the Bible leaves so much out, it is so disjoint, and it creates all of these missing gaps. That's what I'm going to do now. So that's my book, City of God. I'm going to follow that pattern. I remember, and I said, wow, I think he's, obviously it's tongue in cheek, because he does have sort of a narrative that you can follow through the book. It's a mystery kind of thing. A cross is stolen, and there's other kinds of things that lead to a detective, and kind of things. But that one paragraph, I just remember it in City of God and Dr.
Well, there's something to be said. You want to model yourself use it as a model. Guess you can't do much worse than modeling yourself on the Bible. So
Lost Chord also was terrific. The battle scenes that they portrayed during the time of not Saul. Well, Saul was in it, King Saul, and Saul.
Is that a book, The Lost
Yes,
Chord?
The
The
Lost
book, The
Chord.
Lost Chord, she's talking about. Yeah.
Well,
so many movies now have changed, and so many books have changed, in that they leave the openings open-ended. Now, sometimes they do that for a sequel, obviously, but other times they do that because they want to, just let the reader write their own almost ending to
make
it.
you think a little bit, like, where do you think this goes next?
I remember
Interesting. go. I want to mention this before we close here. There's a new movie on Amazon. It has nothing to do with the Haggadah and nothing to do with Passover, but that we watched last night. One Night in Miami. It's about a meeting with Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, who became obviously Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X, Cassius Clay, Jim Brown, football player, and Sam Cooke, the singer.
Oh, wow.
And they were all in, and it's based on a real event. Now, this was a play on Broadway that was very successful. Regina King directs the movie, and it's about, and this is, civil rights and all of this. And the majority of the movie, a majority of it takes place in this hotel room in Miami, which I believe is Malcolm X's room. It's on the night when Cassius Clay defeats Sonny Liston, surprisingly, in the fight. And they're in talking about, the civil rights movement, of course, Malcolm X with his Nation of Islam and all of that. I mean, it's a fascinating movie.
Watch it.
Just the acting is amazing. The
What's
four
the name
leads,
again?
the four guys. One Night in Miami.
One Night in Miami. Yeah, it sounds very similar to the Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley musical that they had on Broadway also, the Memphis, where they were supposedly at the recording studio all at one time. They all got together. It's that one, kind of
Right.
incident in time. Yeah.
It's a good movie. It'll make you think about some things, and it's insightful, to hear each of these different, men who were popular for different things, music and sports and politics and all of that, and just to hear the interplay of, because one of the key things, and I don't want to give anything away, one of the key things is they're kind of upset with Sam Cooke because he's writing and singing all these pop songs, and well, you could use your music and you could use your voice better, and they play a piece of Bob Dylan, and they play like Blowing in the Wind, I believe, Bob Dylan's song. And you could be writing things that are going to get people to, kind of understand the struggle and whatever, but you continue to make these, very nice, beautiful pop records with your beautiful voice, but you could use it. I mean, it gets into a lot of very interesting things. I loved the movie. I thought it was great. In fact, I would like to see it again, because I think there's probably some things I may have missed, in the conversations that were going on and whatever. I think last night was the first night that it premiered on. It's on Amazon Prime.
Amazon Prime.
Oh,
Okay,
yes.
great.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
great. No, we'll definitely try and watch it. Yeah.
Anyway.
One Night in Miami. Okay.
Yep. All right, everybody. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
Enjoy your weekend. Oh, and enjoy, our Martin Luther King celebration. Unfortunately, like the mayor has canceled all the parades and everything that normally would be for that. But we get everything canceled anyway. So
There's a lot of virtual stuff on Zoom actually about Martin Luther King Day, and some great concerts. And I think I sent one out to our Mikveh Israel group for tomorrow, Sunday rather. There's a great concert on Sunday evening, I think.
We used to, in our synagogue in Ohio, they used to bring in the choir from one of the African-American Baptist churches to sing at our Shabbat service on the weekend of Martin Luther King's the holiday, and they would come in, and it was always a great service, because they would sing, and they would get us up, and they'd have us moving and clapping, and hearing them do some Jewish things but putting a sort of African-American spiritual bent on it was always a fascinating. It was a great service. I always looked forward to it, because this choir was brilliant. I mean, they were just amazing singers. So I kind of missed that, and I just found out that my rabbi from Ohio is retiring, and they just hired a new rabbi up there. So, who is a friend of Rabbi? I think he's a friend of Rabbi Haas's, if I'm not mistaken. So I can't wait to talk. I just found this out, so I can't wait to talk to the rabbi about it.
Tim, I may give you a call separately. I did a talk for our little group on Leonard Bernstein the other day. And I'm going to be doing it for our Temple Osa Shalom group, and then I'm going to be doing it for a couple of other congregations, one in New Jersey, one in Long Island, and so forth. They've asked me to do it, and I'd be happy to do it again for, if you thought there was a broader need. And I'm putting together another session on the new Jewish kids on Broadway. In other words, who came after, so to speak, Rodgers and Hammerstein and those guys? You know, it didn't just end with the Jewish.
No. I mean, Jews are still very, very much a part of the success of the theater in Broadway.
Yeah, I was amazed to see it, the number of Jewish musicians, composers, songwriters, that have made significant impact. I mean, I was just blown away. I mean, we got to do Dear Evan Hansen, Jane and I, last year at Olive here, and we talked about that. And those guys, I think, are absolutely incredible storytellers in music. And the guys that wrote Come From Away, the two people that wrote Come From Away were Jewish from Canada. The band's Visit, which is basically based on a Jewish, he was half Jewish, aspect. So I think it's just some unbelievable stuff that, so if you want to, I can do a talk on that, or a couple of talks it would take.
Sure, yeah.
Keep me in mind. Okay.
All right, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Okay, Tim.
Bye-bye.
See you next week. And I'll be talking to Jennifer to get this all straightened out.
Right. Shabbat shalom.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.